Welcome to a new episode of the AW Confidential podcast. The goal for this podcast has been to tell stories that inspire, empower, inform, and sometimes entertain. Today's episode will hopefully inspire a new perspective on a current topic. It's actually a hot topic. At the very least, my goal is to humanize the people on the other side of the fence. No pun intended. That was the only way I could describe it. Carlos Ibarra is an award winning producer, director, writer, and actor for over 15 years with experience in feature films, documentaries, television series, and commercials. He is also the founder of Future Self Media, a full service production company focusing on storytelling and fostering independent talent. Ericka de Alexander, and she will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I got it right.
Yes, 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 yes.
is is a Mexican British, I love that combination, writer, director, and actress. She co-wrote the film that we'll be talking about today. She co-wrote, produced, and directed the short film The First Color. And she is currently working the festival circuit with this project that we're going to be talking about today. And the film is called The Cleaning Lady, and it's a documentary. Now, first of all, thank you both for joining me, Carlos, Erica. I'm very grateful to have your time. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you, Yvette, for having us.
Yeah, thank you. I'm super excited.
So, of course, so this is a hot topic right now. Um, this film is a film that talks about the story of Marisol Reina, mother of three, who crossed the border over a decade ago, leaving her family behind to find a way to give her family a better life. But then she decides to return home to a joyful family, yet there's a lot of resentment. Now, the documentary explains the journey of the domestic worker, her sacrifice, the fragmentation, and reunification of Marisol's family. That's pretty intense. Now, I came across some really interesting data, and if you have any you can share, that would be great. I don't want to get too much into numbers, but I think it's important to just mention it. According to the Pew Research Center, which is a think tank based in DC, there were over 11 million undocumented immigrants in the US as of 2023. And of course, those numbers can greatly fluctuate because of people crossing the border, visa overstays, asylum applications. So I'm not sure how current that is, but we're talking about a lot of people. So there are millions of stories out there. Why share Marisol's? And I believe that's a pseudonym, and you can correct me. But why share her story? What about her story called you? And why do you feel it's important to tell these stories?
So I'm going to let Erica take that question just because she initiated the relationship with the subject, and I think she knows Marisol firsthand, and then I can share some of my thoughts.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, well, one of the primary reasons why we wanted to tell Marisol's story is because I think it is really difficult to hear the stories of undocumented immigrants because of the fear of them getting caught by ICE or being engaged in like legal situations. And because of that, I feel like sometimes we have like a generalized or more like stereotypical perception of what their journey may be. And I wanted to humanize that by putting a face and a name and a personality to one of the stories. And Marisol, she's my friend. So that also makes everything even more important and personal to me because I love her. And she's a very charismatic person. So I just felt like it moved my heart, and I wanted people to like see that human perspective from those narratives.
I
Yeah.
love that. Thank you for sharing that. I love
Mhm.
that. Carlos, your thoughts?
Yeah, and I was gonna say, from my end, just seconding a lot of like what Ericka was saying, I think for me as a producer, it's very important to see other narratives of the immigrant experience, right? I think that as of right now, the experience is always about the trauma that is experienced, right, to getting across the border and the suffering that is in here, and we don't really get to hear the lives that immigrants have made, and especially undocumented immigrants in this country, right? And yet alone, the other perspective of the immigrants who do desire and have left an entire life in the country that they left, right? And that they're constantly balancing this dichotomy of, do I stay here in a depression, right, or in a state that doesn't feel like me, or do I go back home and reconnect with my family, right? But then also being really aware of the repercussions and like, what does that mean? So to me, I felt it was a very engaging and interesting perspective that we haven't seen before. I think repatriation, which is what a lot of people don't recognize, is something that crosses through a lot of immigrants, especially undocumented immigrants. But the constant battle of weighing the pros and cons is something that isn't explored and seen. And I think that it's that kind of narrative, and hearing it from the direct subject is what is needed, so that when people are watching these stories about the undocumented community, they're getting to see a wider scope.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. Now, one of the things that came up for me over and over again, and you mentioned how important it is to tell these narratives. There, we have to be honest. Many people, I think most people have this unconscious bias or just make assumptions about people and situations without having all the facts. And I wanted to ask you, and I know it's a little personal, but have you ever been on either side of this bias? Um, and if so, how did you manage it? How can the film, it's a two-part question, and how can the film shift, maybe, everyone's different, maybe shift perspective as it relates to undocumented immigrants?
So first of all, I mean, like what I would say, I think that the bias is like, unfortunately, in the US, if you are a person of color, if you have an accent, right, or if you disclose that you have some
Mm,
immigrant background, there is no way to avoid the biases, right? Like, despite the education that I have, if I approach a building, they're like, "What are you delivering?" And I'm like, "Hold on, like, what's going on in here, right?"
mm,
Or even the constant question that comes, like, "Where are you from?" You know, and you'll tell them, "Well, I'm from the West Coast, or I'm from California." No, 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 but where are you really from? You know, and you're like, "Oh, you mean my ethnicity, my
mm,
background." So, sharing that part. And I think that in this case, like in this project too, Ericka is from Mexico, also an immigrant. I'm also from Mexico, also an immigrant. I think that that combination of bringing those different perspectives and the different experience that she had compared to me is also one of the things that I think starts to change the dynamic in the story that we're trying to tell. But I think that the bias, there's no way to escape it, right? It doesn't matter. Like,
mm.
share that otherness, it kind of comes with the package.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I want to add that with this particular project, it was a really great learning experience because I was the director and I was also the editor of the project. And I found myself um, discovering some of my bias that I've had and explore like where those narratives of stereotypes and generalizing certain conversations comes from, especially telling a story about someone that I love and is a friend. And coming from like more of a narrative world into documentary, when we were building certain surroundings, when we were interviewing her, like we had this setup of her bedroom, which we built it. So when we were building it, I found myself uh, in conflict with getting the props and getting all the art and being like, this is my friend's space. But sometimes when I was building it, I was like building it as what we would assume that the home of an undocumented immigrant may look like, or like someone from Mexico may look like, their environment may look like. And it was like a constant like checking in with myself and like, because I know my friend, and like, so it was like a constant reevaluation of like, wow, this is not a stereotype. This is Marisol Reina, like, you know her. And also, like, she had the opportunity to watch the cut, like all the versions of the film that we did, and she gave her feedback, and like we wanted to make sure that she felt comfortable with literally every single take and shot. Like, she okayed everything. So that was
Thank you for
very,
sharing that.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it's fun. You beat me to it because my next question was, and I'm curious about this. During this project, I'm sure it was a journey for you as well as Marisol and Carlos. And, my parents came from the Dominican Republic. I was born here, but, they came and they sort of went through their own journey. And I'm curious, was there any, Erika, you just mentioned something, but what was the most surprising or inspiring thing that you learned about the story during the journey?
Ooh. Ooh. Oh, Jakes. Okay. I think that one of the most special things that I learned from this journey is the importance of family and nurturing those bonds. That, yes, distance can be a really big challenge. Consistency is really important, and these conversations of fragmentation in the family dynamics, they're not resolved by, okay, I'm moving back and then we're back to normal. No, it's a long conversation and healing process, and it is an ongoing journey for everyone involved, not only the person who leaves but everyone else.
And
So
getting
I
to know
think,
each
yeah.
other again, right?
Yeah. And like Carlos mentioned, like getting back in touch with your sense of identity in terms of your nationality and what
Mhm.
home means to you, and all of those conversations, that sense of otherness. I know I talked to Marisol, and like that is an ongoing conversation that she's exploring, and it's yeah, it's been a very humbling experience and very eye-opening for me as well.
Wow. How about you, Carlos?
Well, I think that one, just like seconding on like what Erica just shared, the otherness that comes on the other side, right? That it is that kind of thing that when you have been Americanized or you've lived away from your country for a long period of time, you see that kind of treatment on the other end too. And that's, I think, something like a battle that is going on in anybody who shares a bicultural background, right? And
I
so,
don't I
yeah.
no, I'm glad you said that because as I mentioned, my parents were born in and raised in the Dominican Republic, and I was born in the US. And I remember as a child, I took a trip there, and here in the US, people say, "Oh, what's your background?" I'm American. Then I go to DR and they say, "Oh, where you from?" I'm like, "I'm Dominican." They're like, "Oh, de dónde? De qué I don't remember what they call them, not districts, but de qué ciudad?" And I was like, "No, I was born in the US. My parents are Dominican." And they would look at me and say, "You're not Dominican." So it's that, you're right. It's that sort of, no soy de aquí ni de allá.
That's right. And I mean, and they say it, and it's all the time, and it's even like in
Yeah.
terms of endearment. But I mean, I think that for the individual who is caught in that middle ground, that's a difficult territory to fight. And so, I mean, I think for me, it was like even like the biggest surprise without giving too much away. But it's just like how as the film was evolving, right, and as Erica was showing Marisol the project, like the decisions and the choices that propelled Marisol's journey to go in a complete different direction. And I think that once again, it's like the strength and the courage and the risks, right, that immigrants take all the time. That it's like she made that decision many, many years ago. And then now she's making that decision again to go back to another place that is still her home, but not really her home as much. And being willing to put herself there. So I think that the vulnerability that Marisol always gave us was something that surprised me and that I greatly admired throughout the entire process.
Oh, I got chills. So, for many reasons, I found this documentary to be important and relevant to today and the world that we're living in. As a Latino director, and I'm going to ask Erika the same question, why do you think for you this film is essential for the time that we are living?
Well, one, as I mentioned earlier, I think that the fact that you have a Mexican director who's also an immigrant telling this story, as well as a Mexican producer who also understands the journey both of undocumented and documented immigrants, is really important because you're getting to see that perspective. I think that the process too of us being in conversation with the subject and not using this as a ploy or an exploitation of their story, and maintaining that relationship, right? Like, I know that Ericka is still in touch with Marisol, right? So it's not something that just like ended and finished there. So to me, I think that that's an important element. And then again, to just to be able to constantly show what we're capable of, right? I mean, like the fact that I myself, like as a Mexican, as an immigrant, can call myself a producer, a director, a writer, that's a huge change. And I think that these opportunities where we get to share this with the community is something that is very enlightening and also transformative, I think, for other kids of immigrant backgrounds, as well as people who may tune in who may not be immigrants, right? Who are American or share a different background, to be able to see just like how widespread we are.
Absolutely. And Erika?
Yeah, I think that this project is very relevant to the conversations that we're having right now. And it has been a really impactful learning process, especially with, obviously, like every single piece of art that we make is political, whether we like it or not. As producers, as filmmakers, we have certain core values that we share of the things that we believe in the stories that we tell. And right now with political conversations feeling more like movements, I think that it is really important to tell the stories that we believe in, and that in our particular case, that we care about humanizing these voices that have experienced otherness. I think it's equally as important to tell stories that reflect our values and stand by that. So for me, it has been a really even like a bit of a challenging experience to honor that unity between the stories that I tell as a filmmaker, who I am as a person, and my core values, and constant reevaluation of, I'm telling stories about undocumented immigrants, about people that I love, about otherness, about the Latino community. I need to stand by that also when it reflects to my political viewpoints, and defend that at all costs. So it has been a really interesting time to tell this story.
I also just quickly want to add, because I think
Absolutely.
this component of a movement, right, where I think that this conversation of repatriation, right, moving back to your country, is something that is also becoming an option for many immigrant communities. Like, I see it more often with some of the communities that I engage that particularly work with the immigrant community, both documented or undocumented, right? They're already talking about these different pathways and kind of using like how their resources are, because they're capturing just the mental stress that it causes on them, right? And like how much it causes them to be in a state of pain, that they're presenting them with different options and actually giving them guidance to be able to, and if it's not their home country, other countries that exist as a way for them to be able to make the life that they want to. And so I think that, as she mentions that too, that as this movement, this conversation starts to open up, I think it opens other pathways, so that that way the undocumented community doesn't feel like they have to stay in the shadows, or that they don't have a voice, or that they don't have a choice.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Well, one of the things that like to do at the end is end in some sort of positivity or message. And I needed to share this because as I go through this journey, I learned so much from the guests, from reading, from prepping. And I want to share that one of the things that needs to be said is that undocumented immigrants are, I think, not underestimated, but undervalued. I read that using what they call TINs, tax identification numbers, undocumented immigrants pay billions in taxes. Billions. And they come to this country seeking better financial and educational opportunities to give their families a better life. Sometimes it's just a matter of personal safety as they run from dangerous situations in their home country. And they sacrifice their lives. and personal safety by crossing, for example, crossing borders. And this risk is received with isolation and shame when they arrive. And with that said, I wanted you to share one last thought as to just to leave us with something that can help inspire compassion or understanding for this population.
For me, I would say that I think we all just need to remember that we're all human, right? We're part of the human race. And that when you eliminate all of those labels, all of the other components, we're just people. And I think that when you start to do this analysis, we're all after the same things, right? We want security. We want to be able to have the opportunity to pursue our dreams and aspirations. And when we reconnect with that component of us and we remember that we're human and that everyone around us is there, and that we can connect with each other by dismantling and removing those labels, I think we can make a much stronger community and reach the goals that we're trying to achieve.
Thank you for those words, Carlos. Ericka?
I think that telling these stories and humanizing those voices, I think that the more that we do that, the more we are going to see this as more than just a narrative and a conversation, and care more about it. And I think that the more that we humanize it, hopefully other people will also care about it more. Because I feel it in my heart. Like I feel the difference when we started telling the story. We started this like 3 years ago, and I feel it in my heart that,
Wow.
yeah, I feel how like now the passion that I feel for these stories and the care that I have for this community. I'm an immigrant as well, and like it's just been like it has opened my perception to all of the other different experiences that I may have not experienced myself, but I just like care about them more and I want to defend them more. So I think that the more we talk about it, the more we humanize it, and the better the conversations will be.
Absolutely. And it will become increasingly more important come 2025. So thank you. I know that's another conversation. Thank you both for doing this work, for highlighting these stories. I think we need to hear more of them. I mean, I was born here, but like I said, my parents were not. And we do need to humanize these stories. So thank you. Can you share where our community can find the film, can they support it, your socials, Carlos,
I think that
or whoever
I
wants to go first?
I think that the best way to see updates from the documentary would be through our Instagram, thecleaninglady.documentary, or my website, ericadealexander.com. I have some updates there as well. Yeah, or whenever I post stuff about it on my personal Instagram, Ericka de Alexander. Yeah.
Perfect. Carlos?
Yeah, for us, we just premiered a doc NYC, so we're just in the early stages of our festival circuit. So as Ericka mentioned, the Instagram and the website are probably the best places to connect us. As an individual, you can find me at Run Carlos Run on Instagram.
Perfect. And I will make sure to share that in the notes. And again, thank you both for doing the work and for joining us today on this really impactful episode. I appreciate you. And thank you, loves, for joining us on this impactful episode and really important conversation at AW Confidential. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Awesome.